Okay? Yes, sir.
What do you think the major points of a better campaign financing law would be?
Great question. What are the major points of a better campaign finance? Some people see it as public financing. I'm a little maybe fearful of that, because I think what you end up with is then taxpayers are being forced to pay for somebody's campaign that may not want to support. I like the idea that that ought to be in the marketplace, but the two things that I think ought to change. If it is now that a candidate with great wealth can give unlimited amounts of his own wealth to his campaign, then equal the playing field and say that a person without wealth can receive contributions of any amount from anybody. No prohibitions, but total, complete disclosure, so that within 24 hours of every contribution, it would be posted on the internet. And that way, if somebody says, hey, you know what, this guy bought you, make it a campaign issue. But here's what happens now. If you're wealthy, you can write yourself a check for $50 million. You become an instantly credible candidate. You hire fundraisers. You can travel any way you want. You just have no restrictions. If you start out without that, you have to raise money in increments that cannot exceed $2,300 per individual. And that's a long haul to get there, and you have to raise a little bit of money before you can hire the people that can help you raise the more money, and it's just out of control. Should there be some limit on a cap on how much money can be spent? Maybe so. The issue then gets in, are you restricting the First Amendment rights of somebody? And probably the answer is yes. But I'm not sure if at some point we've got to say enough is enough. You can't start campaigning until this date. Campaign season is from this until this, and there are maximum amounts that can be spent. I'm at the point where, though that is somewhat of a restriction, it may have to happen. Otherwise, we really are going to drift ourselves into a nation where we have a ruling class and we have a servant class. And the ruling class will be a handful of people who have the resources to start with, and the servant class will be the rest of us, poor suckers, who don't have a chance. And I think that's a sad thing. Look, I think it's a sad thing, and I think America needs to think about this. If Hillary Clinton were to be elected and then serve 2 terms, we would have a 28-year period in which only 2 families would have occupied the White House. Now, how close are we getting to what we broke away from in Great Britain when you had, in essence, family control of the government? I mean, we need to think about that. Are we saying that out of 300 million Americans, there's only 2 families that can produce for us leadership that is capable of taking this country in a new direction? Now, last week there was a former counselor to the president who said, and I was complimented, he said that Mike Huckabee had the best ideas, was the best campaigner, and frankly was the most attractive candidate. He made some wonderful statements. He said, but he can't get elected because of his last name. He said his last name is the name of a hick. And he said, so, you know, nobody will vote for a guy named Huckabee. And he made, you know, fun of my name. And I was asked about it by Time magazine and several people, and I said, you know, in the Proverbs it says that a good name is more to be desired than great riches. And a good name for me is not a name that necessarily everybody knows. It's a name that stands by integrity and honor and telling the truth. That's how I was raised. I was not raised with great riches, but I was raised with a good name. And the goodness of the name was not in that everybody knew it and that it opened doors for me, because it didn't. My name didn't open any doors in the community. May have closed a few for all I know. But nobody had to ask my dad twice to be paid for something he owed. My dad didn't die with debt on his head that he passed on to me. He died with integrity and with honor. And for me, that is a good name. So I was happy when he said at least that I was a good candidate, and I would challenge him on the idea that Americans wouldn't vote for somebody. I'm not sure Americans want to vote to continue a dynasty of a couple of families, when instead we need to have fresh ideas, fresh leadership, and maybe a completely different last name from somebody who's ever been president before. Yes.